April 19th, 1962. Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire. I hope this message finds you well. I want to report to you about my findings down in Bar Hill, since I was sent to see if I could find any new clues about the case of the missing girl who went cold a few months ago. Here are my findings in order of acquisition, as well as what I did during my investigation. I arrived in a small hamlet on the 10th, early in the morning. I checked into the local inn, run by a widow, Mrs. Cooper. She was kind and welcoming, but also wary of my arrival. This could be due to the shock of the curse, which still frightens people to this day. Regardless, I questioned her about the girl. She told me the girl's name was Anne, and frequently played with her youngest son, Michael, before her disappearance. Furthermore, she told me her father, Jack, a local farmer, and how his farm had recently fallen into disarray and had taken a toll on the locals money-wise, as he was the biggest source of income for the hamlet for the past few months. Intrigued, but not ready to go and inquire about the girl's father, I went to the town center, trying to piece together more about the farmer and his relationship with both his daughter and the hamlet as a whole. However, I only managed to get the testimony of only one individual. The local pharmacist, Mr. Anthony Wells, was a World War II and Fey War veteran. According to him, a few years ago, his farm was nothing special. A simple field with a few animals in an open field. However, after the curse was placed upon mankind, his crops languished and his animals started dying. However, suddenly, around a year ago, his crops are richer than the ones of farming tycoons, and his animals are fat and healthy. However, at the same time, he frequently came and picked up various remedies from Mr. Wells. That stopped after the girl's reported disappearance. At the same time, the farmer, whose last name was revealed to be Wright, borrowed the pharmacist's firearm from World War II, which he never gave back. I was satisfied with the information acquired and decided to move on and directly interrogate Mr. Wright at his farm, west of the village. After a 10-minute walk, I arrived at his house. Just as the reports mentioned, it was in a state of decay and disarray. Not only the house, but the grass and the trees were all dead and brown. Funnily enough, the moment I opened the fence gate, it broke down, and light rain started pouring in. Hoping not to get caught by the rain, I rushed up to his front door. Fortunately for me, he was at his home and welcomed me in. He looked tired, depressed, barely hanging on. His house's interior wasn't in a better state. The windows were dirty, the floor was squalid and full of dust, and an air of death permeated the place. Nevertheless, I pressed on, trying to ignore my surroundings. We talked for a short while, talked about our experiences and our upbringing, trying to make him feel more welcome. I then informed him about my goal, trying to find the truth about his daughter's disappearance. Instantly, his face darkened, staring at me as if he had been shell-shocked. I was concerned, but I understood it might have been traumatic for him to lose his daughter. After a few seconds of silence, he began talking, telling the story of Anne's disappearance.
Anne and I were struggling to maintain our farm after this winter's blizzard. The damn thing broke through our barn and risked making the cattle go ill. I couldn't do repairs around the farm as well as I could back in my day, but I had Anne to help me with most of the work. Always reminded me of your mother, working, not once standing still. Anne was the one who took the cows to pasture while I was taking care of the crops. We managed to do some work with what little we had, selling our crops and dairy to the city. But this winter was unlike anything I've seen. Our crops died as early as November, and we struggled to keep our animals alive through the season. It was the start of January last year. On the 7th, I think, I asked her to take out the cows while I was doing the final repairs to the barn. Nothing major, just some wood planks that needed to be hammered down. The weather was starting to get worse, so I stood by and waited for Anne to come back. Several hours have passed and she had yet to return with the cat. She knew the way back or the road she needed to take to here from Helen's farm. I called her and she told me that no, Anne didn't go to her farm. So I started looking for her in the woods next to the farm. I found her lying on the fresh snow, surrounded by the cows. The poor animals had been stood around her for hours on end waiting for her to wake up. The strangest thing, however, was how she didn't seem to be affected by the cold. Not a single snowflake fell on her, and she felt warm to the touch. She woke up on her way back to the farm with a coughing fit, as if she was choking. I kept her in the bed for a few days, unsure what to do. Not even Tony, the doctor could prescribe her anything other than not to do any work for some time. On the 10th, I noticed how the snow outside starting to melt and the cows were eating the fresh grass that broke through the white blanket. They looked healthier than when I purchased them. Nature itself looked like it was being reborn. It felt as if spring was just arriving in the middle of January. Even then, poor Anne wouldn't feel any better. Every time I tried giving her something to eat, she would refuse. I began wondering how she could even be alive at this point, but nothing came to mind. All I could do was pray for her health. It's been like this for a few months. March came by and we had a head start in our crop production. Our cattle produced enough milk to last us for another year, even more. Anne was finally feeling better, playing around in the garden by herself, or whenever Mike, the boy of Cooper's widow, came by to help us. I couldn't be any happier to see the dainty smile on her face. One day in March, I can't remember when exactly, she told me that she was going out into the woods. Worried something might happen again, I asked her if I could join her. Weirdly enough, I could see the happiness in her eyes fade away, insisting that she wanted to be alone. "I need some time for myself," she said. "I've spent too much time inside. I want to feel nature again." Tony told me that she could use the fresh air, so I let her go, despite my concerns. The hours passed and she had yet to return. I knew something bad must have happened. There were no wild animals in the woods, so I was worried that she may have injured herself. I grabbed my axe, I tracked her footsteps into the woods, and I found her about half an hour later. I still have that image burned in my head. Anne's legs were being wrapped by the roots of a chestnut. In front of her was a man covered with a shroud, which seems to be made of leaves and branches. I couldn't take a good look at the man, but he looked like one of the woodland spirits I read to Anne when she was younger. Poor girl. I knew that she wasn't aware of the situation. The spirit must have put her in a trance as he was doing his work on my child. I yelled at the man, "Get your hands off her!" He didn't respond, like I wasn't even there. I let my instincts kick in and I charged at him, axe in hand. Before I could land a hit on him, I woke up at the edge of the forest. I looked back in confusion and I saw the tree branches leaning to the ground as if they were blocking my access. I couldn't stand for this. I couldn't let my daughter be taken away. I couldn't afford to lose her, so I wanted to save her. This time I knew what I was facing, and I knew just the person that could help me. I drove into Bar Hill and stopped at Tony's place. I knew I couldn't tell him what I was facing. He would have never believed me. I told him I was having issues with the wildlife around my farm and some wolves started attacking my cattle. I knew he wouldn't believe what I had to say. We've known each other for some time now and we grew to be friends. Tony gave me the rifle he used for hunting and wished me luck with the animals. I returned to the forest. It's been a few days since I last saw Anne. I looked around the forest for a weak spot in the greenery. I found one some 2 kilometers away from the place the spirit repelled me to. I cleared a path into the forest with my axe and looked for the chestnut where I last saw Anne. I kept searching and searching until at last I found her. This time it was as if her silhouette was grafted to the chestnut. The hands turned into branches and her feet conjoined with the roots. I could still vaguely see her face through the wood of the tree, the same happy face I would see every time I would wake up. But that wasn't my daughter. Not anymore. I searched my vest and I found my lighter. I took a deep breath and tossed it in the root of the chestnut, and when the lighter hit the ground, a blazing heat replaced the side of the tree, engulfing it around with what remained of Anne. I took a few steps back, then I started running to the farm. Around me the forest started to decay, leaves falling like raindrops. The grass turned yellow, then brown, and then withered away in the scorched wind. The branches that blocked the way into the woods at first started receding, clearing up a path back into the field. I didn't look back. I couldn't bear the thought of looking back. Nature died around me with every step I took, and all I could hear was the blazing wind in my ears. It sounded like a howling of pain, as if my poor Anne called out to me amongst the flames to save her from the inferno I caused. But all I could do was keep running.
After I took his report, I asked him to take her to the places he supposedly burned down. He only pointed me towards his channel location, as he claimed he couldn't go there himself. It was west of the farm, not too far away. Indeed, the area was burned to a crisp. The trees were dead, and not a single blade of grass had blossomed since the events took place. If it wasn't already obvious, I suspect Mr. Wells at least, to some extent, mentally unwell. Demented, some might even say. My theory is that he killed his daughter as a form of sacrifice to appease an entity of some sorts, while in a state of lunacy. After he came back to his senses, he burnt down the place where this murder ritual took place, explaining the burned patch of land. So far, that's the only logical information I could come up with. I hope that with the information I've provided, and with the evidence you already have, you can figure out more about this case. I'll remain in Bar Hill for a few more days. I am going to examine this blasted heath a little bit more. I feel like I've missed something last time I went there, as if something wasn't right. Hopefully though, I am wrong.